Chapter 5. Kelsi frowned as she watched Shane study his menu. He ignored her until he decided what he wanted to eat, and then he put the menu down on the table between them. Yes? She didn't usually openly stare the way she was. Why do you think you want to marry me? I know I want to marry you. Kelsi sighed. But why? I didn't really know the difference between you and your sister until about 4 years ago. I knew one of you had shorter, darker hair, and that was about it. You were just the Weston girls in my head. I went to the café for lunch just about every day, but I didn't know which of you was serving me. I honestly didn't care much. He shrugged. So one day when I got there was a waitress in tears. The place was busy, hopping with people, and someone had said something rude to her. People tend to be rude to waitresses. They think that we're too stupid to do anything but wait tables. I get a little more respect, because I'm the manager of the cafe, but it can be really bad. She hated that people didn't seem to understand that all jobs were needed in the world. If there was no one to scrub toilets, the world would fall apart faster than if there was no one to discover a new medical breakthrough. You had heard the whole thing, and you marched straight over to the table, put your arm around the waitress's shoulders, and told him he could treat people with respect or he could get out. You went on to tell him that his waitress was special. She was working her way through school, with no help from her parents. She was one of the most intelligent people you'd ever met. He shook his head. Most people I know would have just told her to shake it off and brushed it under the rug for fear of losing a customer. Not you. I was really impressed with that, and I asked one of the other diners which twin you were. And you've known who I am every day since then? Interesting. Doesn't tell me why you think you want to marry me, though. Kelsi couldn't figure him out. He was a good-looking sheriff in a tiny little town. She saw the way the groups of women who came in looked at him. He never paid a bit of attention to anyone, other than in a professional way, of course. Why her? Because you're special. I don't think you know how special. He shook his head. I can't explain it, but you're not only beautiful and smart, but you care about people. More than you care about money. That's important to me. She shrugged. She'd never needed to care about money too much, because her family had always had it. It was Wade's job to make sure the ranch was making money overall, and the cafe was such a small piece of it. I guess that makes sense. And you still think I'm smart? Even though you know I go Bigfoot hunting every chance I get? He grinned. I think Bigfoot hunting makes you even more special. You believe in something almost magical, and you refuse to let others convince you it can't be. You take your brother's jokes in stride. He joined hands with her in the middle of the table. You even kept dating Dawn the dimwit. Why is dating Dawn points in my favor? She asked, truly curious and a bit impressed that he kept finding D-word insults for her ex. She wondered if he was poring over the dictionary for new ones every night, or if they just came to him like magic words, raining down from the heavens. Because even though you knew you weren't in love with him, you never gave up. If you were married, you'd never ever give up on the relationship. You'd just keep trying. Don't you think that's a good quality in a spouse? Kelsi tilted her head to one side, considering. Yeah, it probably is. She looked down at their joined hands on top of the table. I can't marry someone I've been dating less than a week. As much as she wanted to please him, it just didn't make sense. Sure, she'd known him for years, but she'd only kissed him for the first time a few days before. It had been an incredible kiss, but she still wasn't convinced. Why not? Your mom wants you to marry someone you haven't seen in over 10 years. Marry me instead. I promise, I will make you happy. He felt like time was running out for him with Bobby on the way. Maybe he was being overdramatic, but her mother was a force to be reckoned with, and he'd rather make her wish impossible before she ever got home to ruin it all. You can't guarantee happiness. Kelsi shook her head. I've watched my parents and grandparents over the years. When Grandma Kelsi died, Granddad Wilfred only lasted a month without her. It was like he no longer cared to live for another minute after she was gone from his life. He became old overnight. That's what I want in a marriage. I want a man who will still be bringing me flowers after 50 years because he knows they make me smile. And who will still put his hand on the side of my face like he treasures me whenever he kisses me. I want him to not be able to survive without me. I would do that, you know. She sighed. Maybe you would, but how can I know that? How can I know exactly what you're like when we've only dated for 5 days? Think about it. What did you do the last time I didn't come to the cafe for lunch? I called the sheriff's office to make sure you were still alive. I was sure you'd been in some kind of shootout and had died or something. It had been a scary day when his favorite booth had remained empty. Even the guests told each other to keep that booth open for the sheriff. So you called the sheriff's office, and when you heard I was out sick with the flu, you had a delivery of chicken soup sent to my house every single day until I came into the cafe again. You didn't even know where I lived, and you made that happen for me. Everyone else knew where you lived. What does my doing that say about you, though? How does that tell me you'll bring me flowers? Kelsi, I'm there in the cafe every single day to see you. I could make my own lunch. I could even take leftovers of what I cooked the night before like all my men do. Instead, I'm at the cafe every day so I can watch you. So I can talk to you. Do you know the other waitresses have been ignoring me for years? I walk in and they don't bother to even greet me. They all know you're supposed to do that. But I never told them to do that. She was baffled and already planning to have a talk with her staff. They shouldn't be ignoring any of the customers who came in there to eat. Ever. Of course, you didn't. They told each other. They saw the way I watched you, and they wanted to see you with a man who was worthy of you, and not that idiot who just left the most amazing woman in the world behind so he could go and make cotton candy for people walking around with mouse ears on their heads. Hey! I happen to like wearing mouse ears on my head. Was he insulting Disney? Because if he was, they'd have to have a talk. Then we'll wear bride and groom mouse ears for our wedding. I don't care. Shane took a deep breath, wishing he could explain how he was feeling better. I will be true to you every day of our lives. I want to marry you and have children with you and grow old with you. Kelsi bit her lip. I don't know what I feel. And I'm a wreck in relationships. Why would you marry me knowing I might get bored of you in a week? She didn't think she could ever get bored of a man like him, but if she did, it would ruin both of their lives if they were already married. Because I won't let you get bored of me. It doesn't matter if you love me now. I know you'll love me eventually, because I won't let you do anything else. Confident in yourself, aren't you? Confident in the fact that we're meant to be together. I want to be married to you before Bobby gets here. You don't need to have that kind of pressure from your mother. You need to be my wife instead. She blinked. So you not only want to get married, you want to get married before next week? Saturday would be good. He leaned forward, his mouth close to her ear. I'll even order the mouse ears for the wedding tomorrow. She smiled at that. What if I don't want mouse ears? What if I want you to dress up as the Beast, while I dress up as Belle? What if I don't want just any other Disney wedding, and instead I want a Beauty and the Beast wedding? She is my favorite princess, you know. He frowned but nodded. Then I'll dress up as the Beast. I don't care what either of us wear. I want to marry you. Let me think about it. Maybe Mom will back off, and then we can take the time to get to know each other like normal people, instead of acting like we're in a bad romance novel. Okay. You think. Let me know when you've thought long enough. I will. The waitress came by to take their orders, and Kelsi watched Shane's face. She'd always loved how open and attentive he'd been when she'd taken his orders. It was always obvious she was more than just someone bringing a meal to him. He saw her as a person. The look was there with this waitress, but it wasn't the same. He wasn't as friendly or open with her. He was still attentive, seeing the waitress as a real human being, but he wasn't as caring, maybe? She didn't have the right word for what was missing, but she wished she did. After the waitress walked off, she toyed with Shane's hand still holding hers. "Tell me something. You were always the most attentive customer in the café. You asked me how my day was. If I sat down in the booth across from you, it was not unusual. You invited me to do it. I saw a bit of that on your face with the waitress just now, but not as much as you've ever showed me." He nodded. "Yeah, that's because she's a person, and I will treat everyone equally, always. What she's not, is you. I knew 4 years ago that I wanted to marry you. The whole town knew I wanted to marry you. That's what you were seeing." She frowned, looking down at their joined hands. "And you don't hate me for not realizing? Why would I hate you for that? You were too engrossed in your relationship with Donald Duck to notice me." "Donald Duck? Did you run out of Don the D-word names?" she asked, giggling despite herself. He shrugged. "I can't use all of the good names for him so quick. I'll run out, and where will that leave me?" As they ate, he noticed she pulled out a small can of Cajun seasoning to sprinkle on her food. "You really do carry a can of that stuff." "I told you I did," she said, taking a bite of the potato she'd just heavily sprinkled the seasoning on. "Did you think I was lying?" "I guess not, I was just surprised. I thought you were joking." "I never joke about spicy foods." "Never. You need to learn that now if our relationship is going to go anywhere, Sheriff. I'll never question your loyalty to spice again. See that you don't." Before dinner was over, she'd ignored phone calls from 2 of her brothers and her cousin, Jess. As soon as they stepped outside, she pulled her phone from her pocket, chilly from the evening air. "I have to figure out why everyone is calling me," she told Shane. She called Will back, knowing her brother wouldn't have called her while she was on a date unless he considered it important. The others probably knew she was out with Shane, but Will definitely did. "What's going on? Someone sick?" "I called to warn you. Mom is determined you're going to marry little Bobby Blakely. She called me to make sure that I encourage you to date Bobby and not the sheriff. She thinks the sheriff is too old for you and has bad breath." "Bad breath? Really? I've kissed the man. Trust me, he doesn't have bad breath." She saw Shane look at her quizzically out of the corner of her eye. "Why is she so determined I marry Bobby?" "She wants him to start a boxed lunch service. You know, so hikers can pick up picnic lunches before they go out. Or whoever. She thinks it's a service the cafe should be offering, and she thinks Bobby can do it." "And Bobby will only do this if we're married?" She didn't understand the logic, but she knew it was her mother's lack of logic, rather than her brother's lack of ability to explain what was happening. "I have no idea. I've never understood how that woman's mind works. I just wanted to warn you that she was calling all of us. She's more determined than I've ever seen." Kelsi sighed, rubbing the back of her neck and the tension there. "I never even liked Bobby Blakely. Remember when I kept coming home crying in elementary school because a mean boy was chasing me around at recess with a snake? And then putting notes in my locker with hearts on them? Yeah. That was Bobby. He was showing his love by using reptiles." Will snorted out a laugh. "He's got away with women apparently. I don't even want to have to work with him, much less marry the idiot. Mom says I need to get over the reptile thing." "Well, you probably do need to forgive him for the reptile thing, but marry him? I think you and the sheriff are better suited." Kelsi blinked a couple of times in surprise. "You do? Why?" Because everyone knows how long he's waited to date you, and he's so kind to you. He's what you deserve, Kelsi. Give the man a chance. She didn't look at Shane as she asked, but what if I get bored again? Are you really worried about that? Will asked. Look, you dated all the popular boys in high school. The ones who were jerks, with a capital J. The ones I would have told you to steer clear of if I'd thought you would listen to me. Shane isn't like that. He's good for you. Maybe. That was all she was willing to concede at the moment. I missed calls from Wade and Jess as well. Are they calling me to tell me the same thing? Probably. Mom was calling all of us tonight. Thanks for the warning, big brother. No problem. Just make sure I get the biggest slice of wedding cake. Kelsi ended the call, turning to Shane. My mom is calling my brothers. And my cousin. I'm sure that she's trying to get people here to pressure me to marry Bobby as well. So what are you going to do about it? He asked. I'm going to think. I'll figure something out by tomorrow, I'm sure. Something like how wonderful it would be to be the local sheriff's wife. Kelsi groaned. That's one option, isn't it? It is. He frowned at her. You're really upset about this, aren't you? She nodded. Mom and Dad are expecting us to do everything they say right now. I might really get pressure from the others to marry Bobby. Let me drive, he said, getting out to walk around to the passenger side. I'm not sure you should drive upset. I just feel like my life is spiraling out of control, she said, obediently scooting across to the passenger seat. I'm not sure what to do. Well, you know what I think you should do, he said, grinning over at her. And if I decide I'm bored and uninterested in you in 2 weeks? Then what will you say? I'll know I need to step up my game. It's my job to be sure I don't bore you. I'll make sure we get date nights. I'll take you out and teach you to shoot. Kelsi perked up at that. You will? Can I get a lavender gun? Why do you need a lavender gun? Because even self-defense accessories should be pretty. He groaned, running his fingers through his hair, before starting the truck. They should? What about my gun for work? Oh, loan it to me for an hour. I'll get it all blinged up for you. Blinged up? The bad guys will laugh me out of town. What bad guys? You're the sheriff of Riston, Idaho, where the most exciting thing that ever happens is old Jacqueline Hardy gets scared and kills one of her lawn gnomes with a hoe in the middle of the night. Shane laughed. That was hilarious. How long has she managed the RV park on the ranch for your family? He hadn't been amused when he'd been called out of bed by one of the guests at the ranch, but in retrospect, it was hilarious. Honestly, I have no idea. I remember going to her house when I was a little girl and playing with her bunnies, so it's been a really long time. Why exactly does she have so many rabbits? She said she's too unique to be a crazy cat lady, so she's going to be the best reality-challenged bunny lady around. Kelsi shrugged. As far as I can tell, she's the only bunny lady around, reality-challenged or not. She's always been one of my favorite people. I heard she talks to the gnomes. Is that true? Never. Kelsi responded, sounding offended at the accusation. Oh, good. I was worried she wasn't sane enough to be on her own. She only talks to the fairies and the leprechauns. She said the gnomes are too stuck up for the likes of her, so she ignores them for the most part. Does she have a psychiatrist? As far as I know, she hasn't left the ranch in 20 years. She has everything she needs brought to her, or she goes to the general store on site to buy it. She shrugged. She doesn't hurt anyone, and we all love her. I think she should be left alone. You should talk to her about Bobby Blakely. Maybe she'll give you good advice. Kelsi sighed. She was Grandma Kelsi's best friend when they were young, and when Grandma married Granddad and moved here, Jacqueline was part of the package. She really played a big role in my upbringing. Every time I got too mad at my siblings, I'd declare a bunny day and go to live with her. I never lasted more than an hour or two, because when I got there, she'd make me start cleaning the bunny's litter boxes. I hated that job. He laughed softly. Which is why you always got it, I'm sure. She also would make snickerdoodles, and every time I visited her, she would give me milk and snickerdoodles, and she would serve it all on this fancy tea set. I always felt so grown up at her house. Go talk to her then. I'm sure she'll have good advice for you. Or she might just send me on errands. She does that sometimes. Kelsi shrugged. Either way, I'll go talk to her tomorrow. What are your big plans for your day off? I'll sleep until 7, which is like manna from heaven for me, go to town for church at 9. After church, I'll come home and do my laundry, which is my favorite part of the weekend, and then I'll go see Jacqueline and chat with her. It's been a couple of weeks, and I like to make sure she's okay. I'm glad you still have her. It sounds like you miss your grandmother a lot. She nodded emphatically. I do. She was my strength. I think I always felt extra close to her because of the name thing, but I'm not sure if that's all it was. Danny and I looked just like she did, except for the eyes. I used to stare at her wedding pictures, and know I'd look like that one day, and be filled with pride that I looked like her. And do you? Look like her, that is? Exactly. It's funny, but I was always one of the tallest kids in school. Mom would say that we were going to be as tall as the pine trees, but we both stopped growing in 5th grade when we were the same height as Grandma Kelsi. She'd just pat us and say, "There's a whole lot of wonderful packed into that height." Danny loved her too. Danny and I were really close when we were little. What happened? Kelsi shrugged. It's not that we're not close now. I love her. We just kind of grew apart. We didn't like being dressed identically all the time, so we were thrilled when we could start wearing whatever we wanted to wear. She wanted to dress more, casually, I guess is the best word. I enjoyed dressing up and being a little more feminine. So we kind of grew apart in every way. I think she just wanted to be Danny instead of Kelsi and Danny. For years, our names were all one word. Or worse yet, the twins. One of our teachers couldn't tell us apart, so she just called us both twin. She'd point at one of us and say, "What do you think, twin?" We tried correcting her for the first month, but it became obvious she just didn't care. We were two halves of a whole for way too long. That's sad. I'm glad you two still get along though. It would be awful if people behaving like that ruined your relationship with your sister. Shane pulled onto the road leading to the café and the ranch house. Let's just stop at the café so you can get your truck. She knew he'd feel obligated to see her home, because she knew that's the kind of man he was. Nah. I'll walk back to my truck after taking you home. He drove past the café and parked in the parking lot on the other side of the ranch house from the highway. The parking lot of the café is too lit up at night. I don't feel like I can kiss you goodnight there. Not in a way that will make your toes curl anyway. She made a face at that. You always think you have to make my toes curl. I do have to make your toes curl. You have such pretty little toes. Kelsi raised an eyebrow at him. And why have you noticed my toes? You sometimes wear sandals to church in the summer. I notice everything about you, Kelsi Weston. You do you? I notice everything about you too, Sheriff Shane. You do not. You didn't even know where I lived. So? Your house isn't you. I notice you. You're wearing a new shirt today, and I like it. The blue and brown plaid bring out your eyes. Do you have any idea how much I love your eyes? They always make me feel like I'm drowning in a giant vat of chocolate. Oh, and I know you like chocolate. You show me a woman who doesn't like chocolate, and I'll show you one who really did have her taste buds burned off. Chocolate is the only reason for getting up in the mornings. Chocolate is better than anything. He laughed. I will bring you some chocolate. He unbuckled and scooted toward her on the truck seat. What are you doing tomorrow evening? Can I see you? She wrinkled her nose. Tomorrow night is family dinner at the café, and it's my turn to cook. Want some help? He had no idea why, but he wanted to be there for her family dinner. He wanted all of them to accept him as her future, whether they really believed he would be part of it or not. She tilted her head to one side and finally nodded. Sure. I was planning on cooking lasagna and making a salad and garlic bread to go with it. Does that sound good? With a family as big as mine, I always feel like I should make enough for an Italian family, so I tend to make lots of Italian. You realize that makes no sense, don't you? She shrugged. Making sense all the time is a sign of a boring brain. I'll keep that in mind. I can meet you at the cafe at 4 maybe? What time is dinner? We usually eat at 6. Meet me at 4:30. That'll be enough time to get everything ready. She reached for him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Thanks for a wonderful day and for not laughing at my quest for Bigfoot. We'll find him someday. He grinned, leaning down to brush her lips with his. And when we do, we need to get him to pose for pictures, so you can prove to your brothers you were right all along. And Danny. And Jess, who hasn't been quite as bad as the others about the whole Bigfoot thing, but she was still annoying. How was she annoying? She was always too busy to go with me. Kelsi complained. A cousin who loved me would have been willing to search for Bigfoot every weekend. He grinned, pulling her against him for another kiss. We'll prove them all wrong. Dream of me. She sighed, stroking his cheek. How could I do anything else? She slipped out of the truck and went into the house, her mind racing. He was different than Dawn, that was for sure. But how could she know if she could make a marriage work with him? She had to get her mother off her back about Bobby, because once her siblings all started to put pressure on her to not make her mother angry, she wasn't sure if she could stand strong. Maybe marrying Shane right away was the best idea. When she closed her eyes that night, she pictured herself and Shane in the mouse ears like he'd mentioned, and she had a smile on her face. He was a good man, and he loved her. Would it be so wrong to marry him before she was sure of her own feelings? Chapter 6. After finishing her laundry the next day, Kelsi made the 15-minute walk from the ranch house across the ranch to the small cabin where Jacqueline Hardy lived. She was excited to see her old friend and wished she took more time to stop and see her. The older woman had no family, other than Kelsi and her siblings, so one of them should be checking on her more often than once a week. Kelsi made her way through the army of gnomes, leprechauns, and fairies that cavorted in the yard. They looked like they'd recently been scrubbed clean, which wouldn't surprise her one little bit. Jacqueline had always preferred her army of outdoor fantasy creatures to people. She knocked on the door and immediately heard a yell in response. Keep your pants on. I'm coming. When the door was flung open, Jacqueline's eyes grew wide as she smiled. If it isn't my favorite Weston child. To what do I owe this pleasure? She opened her door wide, inviting Kelsi to come in. As soon as she stepped into the house, one of the bunnies hopped across her foot, and Kelsi squatted down to pat its head. I don't think I've seen you before. What's your name? The bunnies don't talk, you know. They're not stuck up like the gnomes, but they're kind of stupid, Jacqueline told her. I'm going to get our tea ready. You want milk or actual tea this time? Now that she was an adult, the older woman always gave her a choice of beverage, but Kelsi wanted things to be like they'd always been. I'd like milk, please. Well, sit down. I'll be back in a moment, and we'll chat about whatever has your mind so clouded. Kelsi looked around the room and smiled at the familiarity. Everything stayed the same there, except the color of the bunnies. She knew that none of the rabbits had ever come from a pet store. The first had been injured, and Jacqueline had nursed it back to life. Then she'd found another and brought it in. With the speed of the rabbits procreating, and the addition of more over the years, the older woman usually had between 20 and 30 bunnies in her house at all times. When Jacqueline came back with the tea, she put it on the coffee table, pouring her tea into a cup and handing Kelsi her milk. "Snickerdoodle?" she asked, offering the plate. "I would love a snickerdoodle." Kelsi took 2, putting them on the small plate Jacqueline provided. She knew how much Jacqueline loved her rituals where tea was concerned. "Talk to me about what's happening, Kelsi. I can see by your eyes that you have a dilemma, and, fitting for your age, it's centered around men. 3 of them, I think?" Kelsi sighed, wondering how Jacqueline always knew what she was thinking. "Well, you know I've been dating Don for a long time." Don was an idiot. "If he's the first one, cross him off your list. You should have gotten rid of that boy 7 years ago." "Yes, ma'am," Kelsi answered automatically, knowing Jacqueline was right. "The second man is Sheriff Shane." "Oh. I know Sheriff Shane. He was the one who came to check on me after I clobbered poor George to death, thinking he was a snake." Jacqueline sniffled. "I miss George." Kelsi patted the older woman's hand. "That's right. Well, as soon as Don left town, the sheriff asked me out. We've seen each other several times, and I have to admit, I'm developing feelings for him. Shane's a good man. Strong. He'd be a good husband for you. You'd have strong, beautiful babies together." Kelsi blushed, not quite ready to think about the babies she might have with the sheriff. "The third man is a boy I knew in elementary school who my mother met on her travels. He's a cook now, and since the café just lost its cook." "Did that good-for-nothing Kathy finally find a rich guest to run off with?" Jacqueline asked, shaking her head as she peered at Kelsi over her teacup. Kelsi nodded. She was always amazed by what Jacqueline knew when she never left the ranch. There seemed to be no local gossip the woman wasn't privy to. She wondered if her informant was the same as her mother's. She did, and now Bobby is coming back to cook for the café, which is good in one way, because I don't have to find someone. And that sister of yours doesn't need to be around people any more than necessary, Jacqueline said, shaking her head. Very true. I don't want him here though. Mother thinks I need to marry him, and she started calling my siblings and telling them to put pressure on me to marry Bobby when he gets here. All I remember about Bobby is he was annoying and chased Danny and me around the playground at recess with snakes and lizards." "Oh, that Bobby. I remember him. No, you're better off without that boy. The sheriff is the one for you." Jacqueline spoke with an air of authority, as if she could see all the men and knew what Kelsi needed. Kelsi sighed. "I think so too, but I get bored with men so quickly." Jacqueline shook her head vehemently. "You've gotten bored with the boys you've dated. Sheriff Shane is very much a man. You won't get bored with him." "I'm not in love with him. At least I don't think I am." "Of course you're not. You've only been dating a few days. You will be in love with him, though. Sheriff Shane is your soulmate." "What makes you say that?" Kelsi asked, startled. Jacqueline shrugged, her dress loose on her thin shoulders. "I knew it the moment I met him. There was just something about his face that told me he was meant for you. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I knew I had to save that information for the right day for you to believe me. Today is that day." Kelsi frowned, wishing she knew what to say. "He's asked me to marry him, so I don't have to put up with Mom's matchmaking." "And you're trying to decide if it would be fair to marry him, when he's obviously so in love with you, and you don't know how you feel yet." "You've always been able to know what I'm thinking." Jacqueline smiled, looking down at one of the bunnies. The fairies tell me a lot of things, she finally said. Yes, you need to marry the sheriff, and you need to do it this week. Sunday would be the best day. Would you like me to come? Kelsi gaped at the older woman. The fairies told you I need to marry the sheriff on Sunday? The fairies were being awfully particular lately. You look for Bigfoot every chance you get, and you question my connection with the fairies? Really? Kelsi choked back a laugh. How could she possibly respond to that? I would like you to come, but I have to tell the sheriff, if I do decide I want to marry him, first. Of course you do. Who wouldn't want to marry that huge hunk of hotness? If I were 50 years younger, I'd be all over him, demanding he make an honest woman of me. Are you dishonest now? Every woman deserves her secrets. They do. Kelsi finished her milk and snickerdoodles. I'm glad we had this chat. So are the fairies. They've been worried about you. So has my mother. Kelsi grinned. Let me help you clean up before I head back to the house. Do you need anything before I go? I'm not an old woman who needs someone to take care of her. You just send word when the wedding is, and I'll be there. Jacqueline got up and bustled around, putting the dishes into the sink. Kelsi smiled, catching the old woman by surprise by kissing her cheek. I'll come see you again soon. Jacqueline smiled, raising her hand in a wave. Listen to the fairies now. Yes, ma'am. Asterisk. Kelsi was at the café at 4:30 with all the ingredients for the meal she planned to cook. She opened the door that led straight to the kitchen and put the groceries on the counter before walking over to unlock the front door, so the others could join her when they arrived. She was a bit surprised Shane wasn't there yet, and wondered what had held him up. Her mind played her conversation with Jacqueline over and over, thinking about what she'd said. Despite her belief that she could hear fairies, Kelsi knew the older woman was smart, and her grandma Kelsi had always had great respect for her. She'd always told her if she wasn't around, she should listen to Jacqueline. Shane was a few minutes later than he meant to be, and he stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, leaned against the wall, and just watched Kelsi work. She obviously had her mind on something else, and he didn't want to startle her. Do you have any idea how beautiful you look, standing there, making dinner for your family? Kelsi looked up at him and smiled, her eyes sparkling. I went and saw Jacqueline today. She didn't try to bash you over the head with a hoe, did she? No, but she did say that you were very kind to her after she killed poor George that night. George? Are all those gnomes in her yard named? Kelsi nodded. Do you believe? All the gnomes, fairies, leprechauns, and bunnies have names. I'm doing good to remember the names of my breasts. He blinked a few times. Your breasts have names? Don't everyone's? He decided that trying to follow her line of reasoning would just take him further down the rabbit hole, so he let it go. What else did Jacqueline say? She said she knew the first time that she met you that you were my soulmate, and I need to forget about Dawn and Bobby, and marry you next Sunday. She's willing to come to the wedding, so we need to give her plenty of notice. He blinked a few times before grinning. How did she know that I was your soulmate? It was either something in your face or the fairies told her. It was hard to keep up with the conversation at times. So are you going to take her advice? He asked. Kelsi frowned. I'm thinking about it. Grandma Kelsi always said if she wasn't around I should go to Jacqueline. They were best friends their whole lives, you see. Really? You're considering it? I wouldn't say I was if I wasn't. Do you think I'm the kind of girl who would give a man false hope? He smiled, sticking his hand into the front pocket of his jeans, before walking toward her. I got you something today. She made a face. What? It's not a lizard, is it? Why would I get you a lizard? He asked, surprised she'd even worry about something like that. I guess I still have Bobby Blakely on my mind. Shane shook his head. Not a lizard, and you shouldn't think about other men when you're with me, you know. He caught one of her hands in his, frowning down at the tomato on it. You should wash your hands. She frowned at him. I'm making supper. They'll just get dirty again. Would you wash them? Please? She rolled her eyes and walked to the sink, washing her hands and drying them with the towel she'd laid out earlier. There. My hands are clean. Want to hold them now? He took her hand in his again and quickly dropped to one knee. Kelsi, will you do me the honor of being my wife? If we marry on Sunday, we'll make the fairies happy. Kelsi stared down at him and the ring he held poised to put on her finger. Where'd you get that? She asked, recognizing it. Will gave it to me. He said your grandmother had left it with him when she knew she was dying, instructing that he make sure you had it as your engagement ring. Kelsi swiped a tear from her eye. Grandma Kelsi's engagement ring. He cared enough to use Grandma Kelsi's ring. She stared down at him for a minute, her mind racing. She wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, because she didn't know if she loved him yet, but with Bobby on his way, and the pressure she'd surely receive from her family, it might be their only chance. Finally, she nodded, and he slipped the ring on her finger. Getting to his feet, he swept her into a kiss. I'm going to make you the happiest woman alive. I know you are. She rested her head on his shoulder for a moment. You promised you'd helped me find Bigfoot. He groaned. I'm going to regret that, aren't I? She shrugged, looking down at the ring, which fit her finger perfectly. You are. Standing on tiptoe, she kissed his cheek. I have to get back to work. Do you want to get the garlic bread ready? He nodded, hurrying over to wash his hands while his heart rejoiced. She was going to marry him. He'd asked and asked, but he hadn't believed she'd really agree. He'd have to go see Jacqueline and thank her and all her fairy friends. They worked together in silence, but when they had to reach past each other, there was always a loving stroke along an arm or a quick kiss. She smiled, pleased with him. Never had she dated someone she wanted to touch as much as him. It was shortly before 6 when the noise from the front of the café started. Danny was there first, and she walked back to check on the preparations. Her eyes, so like Kelsi's, showed no surprise when she saw him standing in the kitchen. You joining us for supper? He nodded. If you don't mind, that is? Danny shrugged. I don't hate you. Her eyes went to her sister. Need any help? Kelsi shook her head. I have my short-order sheriff here. He's a good kitchen lackey. You go collapse in one of the booths until the boys get here. You look exhausted. Danny yawned, hiding it behind her hand. I'm pretty tired. They worked us hard. She wandered out of the kitchen. You didn't tell her we're getting married, he said, frowning at Kelsi. I'm going to tell the whole family together, she answered quickly. Trust me, it'll be easier that way. You know your family better than I do. God love them all, she muttered. She wasn't looking forward to their dinner, because she knew her brothers had all talked to their mother about Bobby. Why she felt guilty for not wanting to marry a stranger, she'd never know, but her mother could make people feel guilty for saving the world. Jess was the next to arrive. Jess was going to school to be a veterinarian, and her life wasn't as entwined in running the ranch as the others. She did make it to every family dinner, though. Their cousin had the trademark Weston ice blue eyes that all the siblings shared. The eyes were the one way the twins hadn't looked like their grandma. Need any help? She asked Kelsi, openly staring at the sheriff. Kelsi shook her head. Shane and I have it. Why is he here? You never invited Dawn. Dawn the doofus didn't deserve an invite. I'm here because Kelsi and I are dating, Shane responded. Okay. Jess shrugged. I'll go wait for everyone. I might borrow a page from Danny's book and nap. One by one, the brothers came in, and the cafe got louder and louder. Will was the only one to stick his head in the back. Hey, Shane. Kelsi. Hey, Will. Tell everyone 5 more minutes. Her brother nodded, looking back and forth between them, before heading back out. Kelsi says, 5 more minutes. Kelsi put food on plates, and Shane carried it out to everyone. He couldn't figure out why everyone let her do all the work, but he figured there must be a system. Kelsi was not a woman to let her family take advantage of her without putting up a fight. When they were all sitting around 2 of the 4 tops pushed together, Kelsi looked up and down the table at the people she loved the most. I know everyone is wondering why Shane is here. I heard you were dating at the same time that I heard you fought with Will in the restaurant on Monday night, Wade said. Don't do that again. Wyatt just looked at them, nodding politely. Wesley, her rock-climbing brother, frowned at her. He led the more difficult excursions into the mountains. Mom wants you to marry Bobby. He's coming up here to take over the kitchen. Why are you dating Shane? Kelsi took a deep breath. I was dating Shane before Mom decided I should marry Bobby. And I'm going to marry Shane. He asked me tonight. She held up her hand with the ring on it. Only Will and Danny didn't look surprised. Danny nodded at her, a slight smile on her lips. Kelsi understood. They may emphasize their differences by dressing differently and wearing their hair as different as they could, but they were still twins, and they still had a connection that was special. Wait. Wade frowned. Isn't that Grandma Kelsi's ring? Will nodded. Absolutely. Grandma Kelsi gave it to me shortly before she died and told me to give it to a man Kelsi dated who was worthy of marrying her. Shane is. We're getting married Sunday, Kelsi said over the mumbling of her family. With me or against me, it's happening, so you might as well be on board. The brothers looked at each other before Wade, the oldest and the manager of the whole of River's End Ranch, stood and walked to Kelsi, pulling her out of her chair and into his hug. All 4 of the brothers made Danny and Kelsi look like Lilliputians. I'm happy for you. Kelsi smiled, knowing that having Wade's seal of approval would make all the other brothers immediately fall in line. Wade looked down at Shane, offering his hand to shake. Welcome to the family. Make her happy, or we'll kill you. The words were said with a slight smile on his face, but Shane had no doubt he meant them. I'll do my very best. The enthusiasm that greeted Shane then, with hugs and back pats and handshakes, was a bit overwhelming. Even if his family had been the size of Kelsi's, they were more laid back and didn't often get riled up about anything. He could see he had some adjusting to do, but he'd do it gladly. For Kelsi. He'd do anything for her. After they'd finished eating, Kelsi and Shane left, walking along the grass. Kelsi took a deep breath of the spring air, feeling engaged for the first time since he'd slid the ring on her finger. I'm glad Wade welcomed you like he did. I don't know if the other brothers would have otherwise. Will already did when I talked to him earlier. Kelsi looked down at her hand, the diamond in the ring glinting a bit by the light of the moon. I'm nervous, but happy all at once. We're getting married, Shane. She loved the idea of spending her life with him, but was it just the newness of dating him? Would it wear off? Is your mother going to fly back to try to talk you out of it? She shook her head. Nope. Because all my siblings agreed to keep it quiet. We're going to have a small, private, secret wedding at the ranch house next Sunday. When did they agree to keep it quiet? She smiled. Danny went around and asked them all for me. Danny? I didn't see you 2 talk about it. Kelsi shrugged. Sometimes we don't have to. We have the twin connection thing going. Sometimes we are so far apart mentally, it's like we were raised in different countries, and then there are moments, like tonight, where we just click, and she reads my mind and we make things happen. Am I allowed to talk about the wedding? She shrugged. I'd rather you didn't. Get Pastor Randy to agree to marry us, and we'll get our marriage license in Post Falls. Then no one in town will know except Pastor Randy, and you swear him to secrecy. She shook her head. Mom has a spy in town, and we have no idea who it is, so we can't be seen planning the wedding. She'll do a lot better hearing about it after the fact. How did you figure all this out so quickly? I was thinking about how I'd make it work after talking to Jacqueline today. I need to take you by one day this week, so we can invite her to our wedding. She'll assign the fairies to help us keep it quiet. Shane didn't argue. Instead, he slipped his arm around her and stopped at a park bench in front of the lake. How did we get all the way to the lake? He asked, surprised. She shrugged. When you asked me to go for a walk, I immediately headed this way. I always walk down to the lake when I'm sad or happy, or just need to be away from the chaos that is my family. It's kind of my place. Works for me. He sat on the bench, pulling her down close to him. 1 week from today, you're going to be my wife. Kelsi grinned, stroking his cheek. I know. I'm just bragging a little bit, he told her. I can't tell anyone else, so I'll just keep telling you over and over. She laughed softly, resting her head on his shoulder. You should ask Will to be your best man. Will? Is he your favorite brother? He's the brother I'm closest to. I never thought we'd both make it to adulthood alive, because I was sure one of us would kill the other, but we're really close. I promise. I figured that when he was the one who had the ring. He called me today, you know. She pulled away and looked at him with surprise. No, I didn't know. What did he say? He told me that he thought we should get married quick so that your mother didn't ruin things, and then he said he had something that would help me if I wanted to come get it. Shane kissed the tip of her nose. We talked for a couple of hours. That's why I was late getting to the café to see you. He made sure he gave me the "be good to our baby sister" speech before he gave me the ring. She looked down at the object in question, feeling the unusual weight on her finger. I'm glad to have it. I wondered where it had gone when she stopped wearing it a few weeks before she died, but every time I asked, she changed the subject. She had a different diamond ring that disappeared about the same time that I bet one of our brothers has for Danny. Which brother? Kelsi shrugged. Probably Wyatt, but Danny's a lot more private than I am. We're so much alike physically, but so different in other ways. I'm glad you said you'd marry me. I hope you know that I'm going to make sure you're happy. She smiled. I just hope I can do the same for you. Shane shook his head with a smile. Don't you know you've already done that, just by agreeing? Chapter 7. Kelsi wore the ring on a chain around her neck the following day, so her mother's informant wouldn't find out about the wedding. She knew she was probably being overdramatic about it, but her mother was a force to be reckoned with, and it wasn't a reckoning she wanted for her wedding day. When Shane came into the café, she watched to see if what he'd said was true, and sure enough, the other waitresses didn't acknowledge him at all. She hurried over and leaned down to kiss his cheek, before sliding into the booth across from him. Hi. He grinned at her. Hi. Taking her hand in his, he frowned down at it. Where's the ring? Don't you like it? I'll buy a different one if you don't want to wear your grandmother's. She pulled the ring out from under her shirt and showed it to him. I'm worried about Mom's spy. He shook his head. Really? Her spy? Is she the head of the CIA or something? Why would her mother have spies? Kelsi shook her head, leaning forward to whisper, every move I've made since she left, she's known about. She knew I broke up with Dawn and that we lost a cook, and I know none of my siblings told her. I feel like there are spies everywhere. She looked around the cafe for cameras. Just for this 1 week, we have to keep it quiet. After the wedding, we'll tell everyone. He sighed, shaking his head at her. And you're willing to have a small wedding without everyone you love to make sure she doesn't find out? Yes. Kelsi sighed. Now, I found Grandma Kelsi's wedding dress, which she'd carefully saved for Danny and me. It's in perfect condition, and it fits. It's like it was made for me. So I'm wearing that. Danny is going to wear a dress I have that will accent her eyes. I think that stuff is settled. What about you, Sheriff? What are you going to wear? He shrugged. I have a black suit. Will that work? He was more worried about getting her down the aisle than what either of them would wear. She nodded. Have you ordered the mouse ears? I have. They'll be here Friday. His thumb brushed over her palm. Have you stopped to tell Jacqueline about the wedding yet? He wanted to go with her to see the older woman, if she didn't mind. Without Jacqueline, he wasn't sure she'd be marrying him so quickly. No. I haven't had a chance. Do you want to go with me? His eyes lit up. I can't think of anything I'd like more. She makes me laugh. Well, meet me here around 3, and I'll be ready to take off. She scooted out of the booth. So what can I get for you today, Sheriff? Other than you? She made a face. You've already got me. What do you want to eat? He noticed she was still wearing the red boots she'd borrowed from her sister. When are you going to give those back? She looked down at them with a grin. I think I'm just going to buy her a new pair. Won't these look great with my wedding dress? She loved the idea of wearing the red boots with the pretty dress. It would put her own spin on things. Sure. Were women supposed to wear red cowboy boots with wedding dresses? He wasn't sure, but he wouldn't argue with her. Just a burger today, I think. She nodded and hurried off, already knowing how he wanted the burger. How could she not after years of serving him every day? Asterisk. When Shane got to Kelsi's cave a few hours later, he walked around back, knowing she'd have the kitchen door unlocked for him. He slipped in the door and found her starting the dishwasher. I'm ready, she said over her shoulder, sensing his presence more than hearing him. The dishwasher was already too loud for her to be able to hear the door open. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, hugging her tightly. I missed you today. She patted his hand, turning in his arms, to encircle his neck with her own arms. I missed you too. You're starting to get under my skin, Sheriff. Good. Because you've been under mine for years. He dropped a kiss on her forehead. You ready to go tell Jacqueline? She nodded emphatically. She's going to be so happy. I hope the fairies are happy too. What do we do if the gnomes are mad? He knew she didn't find the whole spectrum of mythical creatures as amusing as he did, but she was usually willing to joke with him about them. No idea. She responded. I don't think Jacqueline cares about the gnomes' opinions too much. She took his hand and pulled him toward the back door, locking up as they went. I got us both four-wheelers, because I thought it would be fun if we went down by the lake as well. A picnic on a cool spring evening with a special man sounded like heaven. She'd never wanted to do things like that with Don, and as his name popped into her head, she realized she didn't miss him at all. After an 8-year relationship, she probably should, but she couldn't. He shrugged, standing next to one of the four-wheelers and putting the black helmet on his head. Sounds good to me. She held up a bag. I packed us a picnic dinner. Race you. Before he had a chance to throw a leg over the four-wheeler to get on, she was gone. She'd swerved around the building and was out of sight before he even got his four-wheeler started. He should have known she'd cheat, but of course, he'd had no idea they would race, so how could he have prepared? She was the most competitive woman he'd ever met in his life. He wouldn't be surprised to see her have a contest to see who could grow their hair faster. He loved driving across the ranch. He could see so much more this way than he ever had by sticking to the roads with his police vehicle. Growing up in a place that was so full of beauty and so unpopulated must have been wonderful. By the time Shane was parked amidst the fantasy creatures in Jacqueline's yard, Kelsi was already standing at the door. He walked up behind her, placed a hand at her waist, and leaned down to whisper, "You cheated. In my family, if you don't cheat, you're not trying hard enough." He shook his head, smiling down at Jacqueline as she opened her door. "Well, if it isn't the newly engaged couple. Come in for tea." She opened her door wide, a silent invitation for them both to enter. Kelsi grinned, stepping inside. "Milk for me, please." Jacqueline looked at Shane. "Do you want milk or tea with your snickerdoodles?" "Tea, please." "Sit. Both of you. The fairies told me you were coming, so I have the tea already made." Shane sat on the couch, a perplexed look on his face. "The fairy thing creeps me out a little." "She's awesome." "Deal with it," Kelsi hissed back. Jacqueline was there a moment later with a tea tray laden with cookies. Once they had all been served, she sat in an armchair perpendicular to the couch and patted Jacqueline's arm. "I'm glad you followed my advice. What time is the wedding on Sunday?" Kelsi looked over at Shane. "Have you talked to the pastor?" He nodded. "Yeah, wedding is at 4. He said that gives him time to eat lunch and nap after Sunday service." Kelsi sighed happily. Naps are made of awesome. She often took a quick nap after she got off work in the afternoon, because she was up so early. She hated going to bed at 8, because it made her feel like a child with an early bedtime. "The wedding will be in the backyard of the main house. Do you want one of my brothers to come get you?" Jacqueline made a face. "Why would I need one of your brothers to come get me? I'm just old, not sick." "I thought I'd offer." Kelsi took a bite of one of her cookies. "Snickerdoodles are particularly good today." Shane looked between the two women, feeling a little out of place in the feminine surroundings. Everything was draped with pink, and it reminded him a bit of Pepto-Bismol. "How are the bunnies, Miss Hardy?" "The same as always, and don't you worry. I haven't killed any of my gnomes since George. That's not something I do often." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for talking to Kelsi about marrying me. I think it was your advice that made her agree." He wouldn't bring up George's untimely death, because he knew the woman was embarrassed about killing a lawn ornament. "I'm sure it was. She was dragging her feet every time I asked, before you told her what the fairies said." "Why don't you believe in the fairies?" Jacqueline asked, her eyes level on his. "They're ancient creatures who have been around much longer than humans. They're here to help us all." Shane wasn't certain how to respond. "I've never seen a fairy, Miss Hardy. I guess I'm one of those men who needs to see to believe." "You miss out on so much that way." "Do you believe in love?" Jacqueline asked. "You can't see that either." Shane looked at Kelsi. "Oh, but I can. I really can." Kelsi blushed under his gaze. It felt so strange having him openly talk about loving her when she didn't yet know how she felt. How exactly was she supposed to react? She patted his arm, lost for words. Jacqueline laughed. "You overwhelm her with your feelings, Sheriff. She never thought anyone would love her quite the way you do." Kelsi quickly gulped down her milk and stood. "I think we should be off now. We're having a picnic by the lake, and we need to have our four-wheelers back before dark." Jacqueline tilted her head to the side, looking at the younger woman. "That's not a ranch rule, and I think everyone in this room knows it. You just want to get away, so I don't mention how embarrassed you are again." Kelsi shrugged, grabbing Shane's hand. He put down his tea and got to his feet. "Thank you for the tea and cookies." Jacqueline got to her feet, smiling, her blue eyes dancing with laughter. So happy to have you both. I'll see you Sunday. I'll be the one wearing fairy wings. Fairy wings? Shane asked as soon as they were a short distance from the small house. Is she really going to wear fairy wings to our wedding? As long as she wears something, I'll be happy. Shane laughed, getting onto his four-wheeler. Where do you want to picnic? He asked. Kelsi shrugged. Wherever. Maybe down on the other side of the lake. I haven't been there since the snow melted, and there might be some signs. She didn't really feel like doing anything but spending time with him, but she'd mentioned her search to keep him from getting a big head. No one needed a big-headed sheriff for a husband. He nodded, knowing it was going to turn into a hunt for Bigfoot, and started his four-wheeler, ready to follow her anywhere. When they got to a small grassy area to the south of the lake, he removed his helmet, watching her closely. That whole thing with Jacqueline made you uncomfortable, didn't it? She nodded. I just feel like I'm doing something wrong by marrying you when I know you love me, and I don't yet return your feelings. He took the blanket she'd tied to the back of his vehicle and spread it out on the ground. The word yet is what I'm counting on. I truly believe the feelings will come. At least he hoped they would. He knew there was electricity between them, and for now, that would have to do. He sat and waited as she put the sandwiches she'd made on the blanket. I'm not hungry yet, she said quietly. The cookies were enough to keep me going for a while. Do you want to talk then? Or do you want to look for signs of Bigfoot? He dangled the opportunity to search for her favorite beast over her head like a carrot stick. Kelsi sighed. As much as I want to talk Bigfoot, we should probably talk future instead. We're getting married Sunday, you know. He smiled, taking her hand in his. I am aware of this plan. So do you want kids or not? She asked, as if it had been the topic of conversation all along. He shrugged. I would like at least one or two. What about you? Oh, I'd cover the ranch with kids if I thought I could. I've always wanted at least a dozen. He swallowed hard. A dozen? Really? He couldn't imagine having a family that big. Do you think that's too many? She asked, frowning at him. There were 6 in my family, and sometimes I wish there'd been more. But your siblings make you crazy. They do. But they also fight for me and keep me going. They're the people who balance me and keep me on the right track. They tease me all day, but if someone else teases me, they're the first to make them stop. They have my back, no matter what. I can see that, but isn't having the 5 of them, 6 if you count Jess, enough? I mean, that's a lot of people. She shrugged. The more, the merrier. Don't you think you want more siblings? It's not really that way with my sister and me. We're not as close. He sighed. I don't care how many kids we have. As long as we can afford them. Okay, I promised Wade I'd talk to you about something. You know the ranch isn't ours, right? We're still playing games and jumping through hoops to get our hands on it. Mom and Dad are going to be giving us a test, and we have no idea what it is, but we have to pass their test to be able to get our hands on the ranch. You don't think I'm marrying you for the potential income from the ranch, do you? He asked, his eyes wide. He thought he'd made it very clear that his interest was in her, not in her family's wealth. No, I don't. If I did, I wouldn't be marrying you, no matter what the fairies said. She grinned at him. I needed to make sure you understood the financial situation for Wade. I'm paid a salary, and it's a decent salary, but I'm about to give up the free housing that comes with it. She frowned. Which is another thing we haven't talked about. I assume you want me to live in town with you? He nodded. I'll even make room on my DVD shelf for you to put your slasher movies on. I'm sure they'll look good on display in your living room. She moved a little closer to him, pressing a kiss to his cheek. I'm not going to have a lot of time this week. I have packing to do, and little details to see to. The restaurant here on property is catering the wedding for us, and I'm going to have tables set up on the lawn. It's such a beautiful time of year, so if it doesn't rain, we're doing everything outdoors. If it does rain, we probably will need to move to the café. Why don't you guys have a building for huge events? I would think, with as much as you have going on here, you'd have something set up for weddings. She shrugged. I'm not sure. River's End has always been a place to go to do stuff, not to stay inside and have dances. It's been all about experiencing the beauty of nature in your own way. Whether you like snow or summer, there's something wonderful for you to do here. I think Granddad always thought that if we had a reception area, people would miss out on the beauty that surrounds us here. His arm came around her, and he stroked her hair back out of her face. He has a point. This place is incredible. I always thought about spending a week at one of the cabins on the lake here. Do you have any idea how happy that would make me? Sounds great, but not for a honeymoon. I don't need to be surrounded by family as I'm getting used to being intimate with my new husband. Yeah, your brothers would be checking on you too frequently. I might have to kill them and throw their bodies in the lake. He shook his head. I've obviously been hanging out with you Westons too much lately. I never threatened to kill people. I'm the law around here, you know. Kelsi grinned, leaning against him. You are, and we're all grateful for that fact. She took a deep breath. Do you think we're making a mistake getting married so quickly? I'm really kind of being cowardly by planning it this way. No, I don't. I think it's the perfect solution. That way you're not hurting anyone's feelings, and I get to have you all to myself that much sooner. It works very well for me. She laughed softly. I think you're thinking about your own interests and not anyone else's. Well, yours and mine. I'm helping you out of a bind, if you'll remember. And that's the real reason you're marrying me so fast, right? He grinned, leaning down to kiss her softly. What do you think? They sat and talked about their future, ate a bit, and then talked some more. It was just getting dark when they dropped off the four-wheelers at the shed. Where'd you park? He asked. At the house. I can walk back. He shook his head. I'm not letting you walk that far by yourself after dark. It's only a 10-minute walk, she protested. I've lived here my whole life. I don't remember the last time there was a violent crime in this part of Idaho. Then it's time for one, so you should be extra careful, and don't forget poor George. People are killed accidentally. He wasn't letting her get off that easily. She was going to be safe if it killed him. Kelsi shook her head at him, but didn't complain when he wrapped an arm around her shoulders and walked with her toward the house. It was odd to think that she wouldn't live there much longer. It had been her home since the day she'd come home from the hospital. After a quick kiss at the door, Kelsi went into the house alone. She was surprised to find Danny waiting up for her. What's going on? She asked. Oh, Mom's being a pain. She wants me to set up this date between you and Bobby on the night he arrives, and I'm not doing it. You'll already be married by then. Kelsi wrinkled her nose. Did you tell Mom the sheriff and I are getting serious? You can do that without revealing wedding plans. Danny sighed. I didn't even think about it. Kelsi frowned, opening her door and noting that her sister followed her in. Will you do a spa day with me on Saturday? She asked softly. I know you hate spa days, but I want my sister with me. And Jess, of course. Do you think Jess would do it? Danny shrugged. I have no idea, but I think it would be fun for the three of us to do together, she said, her face looking like she'd just swallowed an extra sour lemon. You're a good sister, you know that? Danny wrinkled her nose. Are we going to just play in the afternoon? If not, I'm going to have to beg Shane to play short order sheriff again. I hear his deputies always come in so they can complain about his cooking when he takes over for me. Kelsi laughed. They do. I think it's hilarious. You're going to have to start taking his side on everything once you marry, you know. Why? Kelsi asked. Because it's the Weston way. But I'm going to be a Clapper, not a Weston. That's unfortunate. You will still have Weston genes, though, so you'll have to continue to behave like one of us. Every day for the rest of your life. Dani smiled, getting to her feet. We need to have a bachelorette party for you on Friday night. Maybe some slasher movies? Popcorn? Pie? How do you know me so well? Kelsi asked with a wink. Because you've always been my built-in best friend. Dani hugged her. Look at me, getting all maudlin. Don't expect this to happen again. Kelsi smiled. I won't. I know that you're above the feelings we lesser mortals have. You're tougher than that. So true. Don't tell the others I was nice to you. They might start expecting it, and it's just not going to happen. Dani started to close the door behind her. Hey, Dani? Yeah? I love you. Whatever. Me too, I guess. Dani grinned at her twin and closed the door behind her. Kelsi changed into her pajamas, thinking about how special her sister was to her. They may not always appear to be close or get along, and Dani may grumble a lot more than most people, but Kelsi couldn't think of anyone she'd rather have at her side for her wedding. Maybe she could get her to blonde her hair for it, so they could actually look like twins again. She shook her head, dismissing the idea before she even proposed it to her sister. She enjoyed having her own identity too much for her to be willing to look that much like her sister again. After brushing her teeth, Kelsi climbed into bed and folded her hands behind her head, staring up at the ceiling. Her life was about to change in a way she'd never expected. She just hoped she was doing the right thing. Asterisk. Shane stayed up late making room in his closet for Kelsi's clothes and trying to get everything situated. He hoped she didn't have as much stuff as he did, because there wasn't much room left in his junk room. When he finally got into bed, he laid with his eyes open for a long time, thinking of her. He hoped that marrying immediately was the right thing for her, like it was for him. He didn't know if he'd have been able to stand a long engagement anyway. After 4 years of waiting, it already felt like it had been forever. Soon they'd be married and he'd be the happiest man on earth. He only wished he could be just as sure of Kelsi's happiness. Chapter 8. By Friday night, Kelsi realized she was very nervous about marrying the sheriff, and she couldn't figure out why. He was a good man, one who loved her beyond her wildest expectations. So why did the idea of the wedding make her so nervous? When she met up with her sister and cousin in Jess's cabin, one that was usually reserved for guests, but she'd claimed as her own when she'd started veterinary school, she felt her stomach rumbling with nerves. Jess opened the door to welcome her, and she was surprised to see that Dani was already there. The whole house smelled of popcorn and pie, and Kelsi felt tears well up in her eyes. They'd done exactly what she wanted. You guys are the best sisters a girl could ever ask for. Jess smiled. I'm glad you wanted to do this. I needed a night off from studying to be with my favorite cousins. What movie are we watching? Kelsi asked, excited. Dani and Jess exchanged looks. We didn't want to have to watch a slasher movie tonight. Dani looked almost nervous when she told her. Kelsi frowned. So what are we watching? Not a rom-com. Tell me you guys don't expect me to sit here and put up with watching a stupid romantic comedy. Dani sighed. Jess wanted to watch Notting Hill, but I didn't think you'd like that. No. Please tell me you nixed that idea. I did. I figured if we weren't going to watch a slasher, we couldn't watch a rom-com, so we compromised. She pulled a superhero movie from behind her back. Kelsi shrugged. Better than a rom-com, I guess. I made popcorn, and I got you some jalapeno cheddar seasoning for your bowl. Jess said with a grin. Sometimes I think no one knows me at all, and then I realize you guys couldn't love me as much as you do if you didn't know me. Kelsi sighed, contentedly, thrilled about the seasoning. It was such a small thing, but it made her realize her cousin really had thought of her. She sat down on one end of the couch, knowing her sister and cousin would want to share a bowl of popcorn. She sprinkled a generous amount of seasoning on her own bowl and waited while Danny put the movie in. Thanks for bachelorette partying with me, girls. Danny shrugged. I can put up with spending time with you too, as long as you're not expecting me to go to some strip club and stick dollar bills on mostly naked men. Kelsi wrinkled her nose. I can think of many things I'd rather do. Halfway through the movie they paused it to move on to the pie portion of the evening. Warm huckleberry pie, Kelsi said, accepting the plate from Jess. Did you get it from the restaurant? Well, I sure didn't have time to bake it, Jess retorted, handing Danny a piece of pie, before going back for her own. Kelsi didn't care who made it, but the restaurant had the best huckleberry pie recipe in the whole state of Idaho, so she smiled as she sank her fork into it. Do you know Shane had never had huckleberry pie until our first date? Who let him live in Idaho without trying huckleberry pie first? It should be a criminal offense. She grinned. I think he should have to arrest himself and spend a couple of days in jail. Danny shook her head. Without you? You want to spend your wedding night alone? Maybe not right now. I'll suggest it after our first real fight. Looking forward to the first fight? Danny asked. Nope. But I know it's inevitable. I fight with everyone I love. I'm good at it. Kelsi knew she was quirky and not always the easiest person in the world to get along with. It was part of her charm. Jess laughed and moved around the coffee table to sit down with her own pie. I hope he makes you as happy as you deserve to be. Kelsi looked at her cousin with her eyebrows drawn together. I'm not sure if that's a good wish or a bad one. Take it how you will. Asterisk. Kelsi met Danny at the ranch's spa the following morning. Jess had claimed to be too busy with schoolwork to take enough time off to be there for the bachelorette party, spa day, and the wedding. She had chosen the two most important, and begged off the third. Are you excited for this? Kelsi asked Danny. Danny sighed. I'm doing it, aren't I? The look on her face left Kelsi with no doubt she was dreading every minute of the experience. Kelsi threaded her arm through her sister's. I guess for now that'll have to be enough. Together, they walked to the front desk and introduced themselves. The spa was relatively new, and neither had been there yet. We're Kelsi and Danny Weston. We have appointments. The girl at the desk looked up, her eyes wide. Yes, of course. I'm Angela Myers. You can call me Angie. I'm the manager here. Kelsi smiled, reaching out a hand to shake the other woman's. It's nice to meet you. We want the works. I have you scheduled for massages, waxing, mani-pedis, and then facials. Am I missing anything? Angie asked, obviously nervous. That sounds about right. There's a lunch in there too, right? Yes, Miss Weston. I've ordered the soup and sandwiches you wanted to be brought in from the café here on property. Kelsi grinned. I guess we know who's making our lunch then. Angie gave them a blank smile. Obviously they'd done a better job than Kelsi realized, keeping the wedding quiet. Earlier, Kelsi had gone in to see how the wedding cake preparations were coming along at the restaurant before leaving the house, and she was pleased. It was all falling into place. She and Shane had gone for their marriage license the previous day, and he'd promised to be on time, wearing his Sunday best. Danny and Kelsi were led to a small waiting room and given glasses of water with some kind of pieces of fruit floating in them. Danny hated water with floating stuff, but she didn't complain. The only service she won't be together for is your massage. You'll have facials at the same time in the same room, and your mani pedis will be together as well. The waxing will be done in the same room as your massages, so I guess that will be a part too. Angie frowned. Do you have any questions for me? Kelsi thought hard to come up with a question. If you were a small animal, what kind of animal would you be? Angie's eyes widened and she looked at Danny as if to find out if Kelsi really needed an answer. Danny shook her head. Ignore my sister. She lost her grip on reality a long time ago. Angie hurried out of the room, obviously afraid Kelsi was going to ask her something else. Kelsi frowned at Danny. I really wanted to know. She reminded me of one of Jacqueline's frightened bunny rabbits. Or maybe a squirrel. I could see her as a squirrel. Hey, Kelsi? Yeah, Danny? You're scary sometimes. Kelsi shrugged. I don't mean to be. Sometimes I'm just curious, so I ask the questions I'm curious about. Sometimes it might be better if you held your questions in. But what if I explode from wonderingness? Danny sighed. You won't explode. You'll be just fine. She looked up as someone came into the room. I'm looking for Miss Weston, the woman said softly. We're both Miss Weston. Which one? Kelsi asked. Kelsi, the woman said. She was obviously nervous as well. I'm Kelsi Weston. Are you going to massage me until I don't remember my name? The girl laughed softly. Yes, I will do my very best. I'm Maddie, by the way. Kelsi stood up to follow her. This is my first massage. You'll have to tell me how it all works. She waved to her sister as she followed Maddie out of the room and into a small room with a table in the middle. I need you to get undressed as much as you're comfortable undressing. You can keep your panties on if you feel more comfortable that way, but the bra definitely needs to go. Then get face down on the table with your head in the hole. Cover up with the sheet. I'll give you 5 minutes to get undressed. Kelsi stripped down, leaving her panties on, because it felt too awkward otherwise. She laid face down on the table and waited. It seemed like forever before Maddie stepped back into the room. Are you comfortable? Maddie asked. Kelsi lifted her face from the hole. I guess so. Why is my face in a hole? Maddie chuckled softly, coating her hands in oil. To make it so you can breathe. I'm going to start with your back and work my way to your legs. Let me know if the pressure is too soft or too hard. Kelsi felt weird having someone touch her so intimately without knowing anything about her. Tell me about you. Well, let's see. I'm from Iowa, and I went to massage school there. I wanted to see more of the world, so I spent a year doing massage on cruise ships, but that didn't feel right for me. So I spent a month with my parents, and I saw an ad for a new spa opening at a dude ranch in Idaho. Sounded like the life for me, so I came here. I've been here since the spa opened, so about a month, I guess. What do you think of Idaho? It's so beautiful. I would love to stay here forever. This is your family's ranch, isn't it? Kelsi and Maddie chatted through the 90-minute massage. When she was done, Maddie used a towel to dry off Kelsi's legs. Your wax is next, but I don't torture people like that. I bring pleasure, not pain. Kelsi sighed. I've never had a wax either. Is it bad? What all are you getting done? Eyebrows, underarms, and legs. Maddie frowned. Legs will be the worst. Just don't kick Karen. She's my friend. I'll do my best. It doesn't sound pleasant. It's not. I'd rather shave any day. Maddie left, and Kelsi lay staring at the ceiling, worried about the pain that was coming. Did she have to go through with this? 15 minutes later, Kelsi met Danny in the waiting room, where they had water and soup waiting for them. I don't think I like being waxed, Kelsi said, rubbing one of her legs. She was wearing the robe Maddie had left for her, but she wasn't particularly feeling great. Danny frowned. It wasn't something I see myself doing regularly either. What's wrong with a good old-fashioned razor in the summers, when a razor is needed? I don't exactly keep my leg hair fashionably shaved for summer. Who does? Kelsi asked. My motto is, if it's not braidable through your jeans, there's no need to mess with it in the winter. Are you still going to do that when you're married? We're going to have to see how I feel about leg hair when winter comes, and if it bothers Shane. Who knows? By the time they'd been pampered all day, Kelsi felt like a noodle that had been cooked a little too long. As they walked home from the spa, she sighed. That was nice. Now I want to sleep for a week or two. You seeing the sheriff tonight? Danny asked. Kelsi shrugged. He didn't say anything, so I don't know. When they got to the house, they had their answer. Shane was sitting on the back porch waiting for her. He stood up and walked over, nodding at Danny. Did you ladies have fun? Danny shrugged. It didn't kill me. Without another word, she walked into the house, leaving Shane staring at the closed door. Why does your sister hate me? He asked, shaking his head. She doesn't. She thinks you're good for me. She treats everyone that way. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him softly. What are you doing here? I thought you might want to go into town for dinner or something. He looked down at his hands. Really? I needed to see you. I had this dream you were backing out, and I needed to make sure you were going through with the wedding. She laughed softly. Of course, I'm going through with it. Can you see me being the happy wife of Bobby Blakely? I don't want to imagine you being the wife of anyone else, happy or not. He brushed his lips across hers. Do you want to do dinner? Kelsi thought about everything she needed to do that night and frowned. How about we get the restaurant to make us a pizza to share, and you can help me pack up my room? Oh, I wasn't thinking about you having to pack tonight. She shrugged. I don't have a ton left to do, but it's enough that I don't want to put it off. If I'm not here, we can be renting my room out and making money on it. He followed her down a hall to an employees-only door and watched as she went through it. Come on. You're with me. She grabbed his hand and pulled him into the kitchen with her. She went to the chef, Samuel, who looked at her with a sigh. You always want something. Sam, you know I'm your favorite. I just need one little favor. You fought with your brother in my restaurant again. I told you to stop that nonsense. He was being a pain. You know how Will gets, spending every waking moment trying to find new ways to torment me. She put her hand on his arm. It's a little favor. What do you want? You know I'll do anything for you. Sam had been the chef at the restaurant since Kelsi was 6, and she'd spent a lot of time cajoling him into making her things she shouldn't have. We want a pizza. A pizza? I was trained in one of the finest culinary institutions in this country, and you want me to make you a pizza? She smiled sweetly. A kitchen sink pizza. Add everything you can find. Sam sighed. You want chicken again? Of course. I refused to add fish this time. That was disgusting to even look at. When you grill the chicken, add some of my Cajun seasoning. Fine. You go. I'll have it brought to your room. Sam looked at Shane. You gonna be in her room? I was going to help her with something there. You'll leave the door cracked. She's like a daughter to me. Kelsi stood on tiptoe and kissed Sam's cheek. Thanks, Sam. She grabbed Shane's hand and tugged him out of the kitchen and toward her bedroom. He thinks we're doing something wrong, Shane said, frowning at her as soon as they were in her room. You should have told him we're getting married tomorrow. I couldn't. He has my mother on speed dial. She walked to a bookshelf and handed him a box. All the books go in the box. I have my Kindle out, so I can still read before bed. Shane nodded, getting right to work. He noted the titles as he packed them away. All she seemed to have were Stephen King, Edgar Allan Poe, and H.P. Lovecraft. "Don't you read anything but horror?" he called. She came out of her closet with her arms full of shoes. "Of course not." "Well, I did when I was in school, but thankfully that nonsense is over. Now I read for pleasure, and to me, that means horror." "Do you ever get scared when you read and watch so much horror?" She piled the shoes into the bottom of a box, slowly adding other things. "Sure. That's part of the fun." She shrugged. "As long as my feet are under the covers, the monsters can't get me." He sighed. "Am I going to have to look for monsters under the bed?" She grinned at him. "Would you if I asked?" He caught her hand and pulled her down onto his lap, kissing her softly. "I have a feeling I'd do anything you asked of me. Deciding to marry you is the smartest thing I've ever done." She sighed, resting her cheek against his shoulder. "You only say that because the fairies told you to marry me. Can I tell you a secret?" He nodded, his eyes wary. "I guess. I think the gnomes and leprechauns are a whole lot more trustworthy than the fairies. Sometimes I'm not sure whether I should be afraid or just love you." She sighed, kissing him. "I think loving me is always the answer." There was the sound of a loud throat clearing coming from her doorway. "Thanks, Sam." She jumped up and took the tray from him, which contained the pizza and 2 plates. "Why are you packing?" he asked. "You're not moving in with the sheriff." "Over my dead body." Kelsi sighed. "You know the big wedding the kitchen is getting ready to cater tomorrow?" Sam nodded. "Yes? That's our wedding. We're not telling people, because Mom wants me to marry a boy I knew in elementary school who chased me around with reptiles." Sam frowned. "So you want me to keep this a secret from your mother?" The idea seemed to pain him. "Please? Just for 24 hours. Jacqueline knows, and she approves." Sam rolled his eyes. "Did the fairies tell her that you two should marry?" Kelsi nodded emphatically. "They did." "Please tell me that's not the only reason you're marrying him." Sam looked from Kelsi to Shane. "I want you to be happy, kiddo." Kelsi smiled. "I don't think I could ever find a man who loves me more than Shane does. Being married to him will make me happy," she said. And it was true. But would being married to her make him happy? Sam shrugged. "I won't say anything." He looked at Shane. "You treat her right." Shane got to his feet, holding his hand out to shake the chef's. "She's really special to me. I'm not going to hurt her in any way. See that you don't." Sam left the room, leaving the tray on her bed. Shane noticed he left the door more than a little ajar. "He's worried about you. Sam's always been there for me, and I've been special to him. He was the one who held me the day my grandma died. Mom and Dad were busy with Granddad and making the funeral arrangements. Sam had time for me." Shane nodded. "I just wish you didn't have the whole world watching us to make sure I didn't hurt you. It's hard on me sometimes. I can't change the people who love me, and I wouldn't. It feels good to have people care so much." "I understand." He put pizza on 2 plates and handed one to her, looking at the pizza curiously. "A kitchen sink pizza?" "Oh yeah. He throws on just about everything. I love these." Shane took a bite, not as excited about all the toppings as she was, but it wasn't terrible. "I can choke this down. Soon, you won't even need me to make you spice down enchiladas." "Don't count on that. I want to still have taste buds, not burn them off." She grinned, taking a huge bite of her pizza. He was coming around, and she was so glad. Asterisk. Kelsi had a regular hairdresser in town, and she'd invited her out for the day, promising to pay her triple, and telling her to bring her supplies. Sheila Smyer had been her hairdresser since she was a little girl, and she came grumbling. Once she arrived, Kelsi told her about the secret wedding, and Sheila squealed with excitement. "I'm doing your hair and makeup." Kelsi grinned. "I knew I could count on you." She'd just finished lunch and was ready to get the ball rolling. Getting ready for a wedding was hard work. She sat in her robe, in a chair in her room, and let Sheila do whatever she wanted. She knew the older woman would make her look as good as she possibly could. Why, Sheila was practically a miracle worker. Danny knocked on her door, just as Sheila was finishing up. "Kelsi, I need a trim before the wedding. My hair is out of control again," she trailed off when she saw the hairdresser in her sister's room. "I'll come back." Danny had once gone to Sheila for her own haircuts, and there was true fear on her face when Danny spotted her. Sheila grabbed Danny's wrist. "You will not. Today is your sister's wedding day, and you're going to look your best if it means I have to sit on you to fix your hair." Kelsi knows nothing about hair. Sheila threaded her fingers through Danny's hair, groaning loudly. "Do you have any idea what a mess she's made of this?" Danny shrugged. "It doesn't bother me. I'll fix it decently today, and give you a trim. One that will flatter you and not look like someone took a butcher knife to your head." "It's not that bad," Danny protested. Sheila stopped her with a look, turning back to Kelsi. "You go and get your dress on now, and I'll deal with your sister." She shook her head at Danny. "Short is fine. Butchered is not. It will be fixed today." Kelsi bit her lip at the look on her twin's face as she hurried from the room, taking her dress into Danny's to get ready. She couldn't quite get the buttons done up herself, so when she was finished, she left the back of the dress gaping and stood outside her bedroom door, listening for yells. When she heard nothing, she stepped into her room. What she saw shocked her. Danny was sitting meekly while Sheila worked her magic. Kelsi sometimes forgot that they could be identical, because they'd worked so hard not to be. Danny looked pretty for a change, sitting there with her short hair styled into something that looked decent. "You look beautiful, Danny." Danny made a face. "I look all made up." "Not yet," Sheila answered. "But you will, before I'm done with you. Go and get dressed, and I'll do your makeup after I finish Kelsi's." Just before Danny left, she stopped her. "If you ever let your sister touch your hair with scissors again, you will feel my wrath." Danny nodded and hurried away. As soon as she was gone, Kelsi burst out laughing. "I think you scared her, Sheila." "I hope I did." "And you? You stop whacking her hair off every time she asks." "If I don't do it, she will. And she does an even worse job than I do." "What am I supposed to do?" "Call me out here. For that girl, I will make house calls." Sheila waved at the chair Danny had just vacated. "Sit. Would you do my dress up first?" Kelsi asked, turning her back to the other woman. Sheila immediately complied. "This dress is beautiful. Old. It was Grandma Kelsi's. I always knew I'd wear it someday." Kelsi wondered if her sister would wear it when she married. "It suits you." When she was finished with the buttons, Kelsi sat down and waited patiently while Sheila did her makeup. Danny slipped into the room during the process, wearing the ice blue dress Kelsi had chosen for her to borrow. "You look wonderful. Your eyes look so amazing in that color." Danny sat on the edge of the bed, obviously feeling uncomfortable in the pretty dress. "You mean our eyes? The ones that are identical? I look like you with short hair today." Kelsi frowned. "It's not a bad thing for us to look alike every once in a while. Just not every day. Trust me, today, everyone will know I'm me, because I'm dressed in the wedding dress." She grinned. Besides, I'll be the one in the bridal mouse ears. She nodded to the box sitting on her otherwise empty nightstand. Danny grinned. I suppose you're right. I just hate it when everyone confuses us. She shook her head. I can't believe you're actually wearing those things to get married in. You'll look ridiculous. When was the last time anyone confused us? Kelsi asked with surprise. It had been years as far as she knew. I don't care if I look ridiculous. I'll be me. Danny shrugged. I don't even remember. I think we're safe from confusing people now. There was a knock on the door, and Danny called for whoever it was to come in. Will stood there for a moment, his eyes wide. You both look beautiful. Danny wrinkled her nose at the compliment, and Kelsi grinned. You mean I look beautiful, and Danny looks like a girl for a change? Will shrugged. If you say so. He looked between his sisters. How much longer? Shane is starting to freak out. Kelsi looked at the clock on her wall. Tell Shane to get a grip. Wedding isn't supposed to start for another 30 minutes. I'm almost ready, and Danny will be ready in 10 minutes. We got this. Wasn't it the bride who was supposed to get nervous before the wedding? Will sighed. I'll tell him, but he seems really antsy. I'm afraid he's going to start shooting or something. Kelsi waved her brother away. Surely Shane wasn't as nervous as her brother said. He wasn't the type to freak out so easily. Besides, he would just have to arrest himself if he started causing problems, and she knew he didn't want to do that.